When it comes to drama and a star requesting a trade, the NHL has to be the most vanilla, unproblematic sports league in the world. I mean, in the NBA just this past year, we saw a generational star like James Harden literally making himself look out of shape and just flat out not trying, just so that he could force the hand of his team into trading him. This would be the equivalent of Connor McDavid showing up to camp fat because he is done with Edmonton. Even look at my man Jack Eichel. The Buffalo Sabres are one of the biggest tire fires in all of North American sports. Whether it was literally having to fire every staff member or a string of horrible trades and signings. Eichel has a lot of reasons to be extremely upset with the Sabres organization. Yet, my man doesn't say a peep. No complaining, no bitching, just respect. Now, don't get me wrong, many people love this about the game of hockey, and I completely understand if that's your stance. But no matter how you slice it, drama sells, drama creates headlines, which will only lead to the long-term growth of our game. So with that being said, let's go over the most dramatic, if not straight up absurd trade requests we have seen in the game of hockey. And if you enjoy the videos, make sure to press subscribe for some more awesome hockey content. Chris Pronger, the most prolific enforcer to play the game of hockey. Because not only was he a giant, not only was he an absolute savage, but he is the only defenseman in the modern NHL era to take home a Hart Trophy, as Chris Pronger would single-handedly carry the St. Louis Blues to a President's Trophy finish. However, even though Pronger would establish the Blues as a powerhouse, ownership had other plans, because in just a chaotic mess, the owner of the Blues at the time wanted an NBA team, but the NBA did not approve it. And just because of that, they would turn around and just sell the St. Louis Blues franchise. And just an absurd result of this chaotic business decision, the Blues ownership would begin having fire sales with their players, as they were trying to get rid of all the big contracts on the team to make the team look more affordable and easier to sell to a new franchise owner. And as a result, the St. Louis Blues would shockingly ship off their franchise player in Chris Pronger for what was one of the worst trades in NHL history, just to save a couple extra bucks. Excuse me? As the Edmonton Oilers would acquire a Hall of Fame player for what was basically a top 4 defenseman in Eric Brewer and 2 fringe minor league players. That's insane. One of the best to ever man a blue line in the history of the sport, basically just given away to save a couple bucks. But what was really wild about this transaction, Chris Pronger would show up to Edmonton and single-handedly lead them to the Stanley Cup Finals. And keep in mind, the team didn't even make the playoffs the year before. But Carolina would shatter their dreams in Game 7. And this is where the drama would begin. Because even though the Oilers were now a reinvented squad, even though Chris Pronger just signed a 5-year extension, Chris Pronger's wife did not like Edmonton. So he would demand a trade on behalf of his wife. And without a breath, he would be shipped off the next week to the Anaheim Ducks. Chris Pronger, even though he was locked down for another 4 more years, would show up to Edmonton, bring them to the finals, and just peace out. And what is absurd about this trade is Edmonton right after this season would enter the dark ages, as they went from a finals team, stemming hope in the franchise, to missing the playoffs 10 years in a row, resulting in the current Edmonton Oilers we see today. And to add another layer of just complete chaos, Chris Pronger, the very next season, would lead the Anaheim Ducks to a Stanley Cup finish, while at the same time dooming the Edmonton Oilers. Even though Toronto is considered the hub or the center of the hockey universe, no franchise even comes close to the marketability that the New York Rangers have. But it does make sense, and it's also the reason why the Rangers have the highest valued team in the NHL, as they were just valued at over $1.65 billion. And for all those reasons and many more, New York is a bucket list city for many, if not most, NHL players. Which is why we always see superstars playing their last days in the Big Apple. Wayne Gretzky, Marcus Naslund, Messier, even Yager. Which makes sense because the dude has been playing longer than most NHL players have been alive. But you get my point. People love playing for the Rangers. Especially this guy, Sean Avery.
On the handshake line that you and Martin Brodeur did not exchange pleasantries afterward, did that surprise you? What'd you think about that?
Well, everyone talks about how unclassy I am, and Fatso there just forgot to shake my hand.
Because if you watch hockey from the early to mid 2000s, Avery was easily the most hated man in hockey. The dude was literally pulling this stuff in a normal game. Hilarious, but he also did this stuff. Yeah, not as funny. But after being traded to the New York Rangers, Avery became an attraction. Not only was he pulling this stuff in a normal game, but he was putting up points while having 257 penalty minutes. However, in the summer of 2008, Sean Avery was offered a lowball contract. He himself said it was valued around $900K, which I get is insulting, because as a result, Avery would instead test free agency and get the bag, as he would sign a 4-year $15.5 million contract, which is a lot more than $900K. Except it was instant regret for Avery, and he used all his power to somehow land his way back in New York, which resulted in him acting out and getting banned from the Dallas Stars organization 23 games into his 4-year contract, as he would make some crude comments about his ex-girlfriends, which resulted in him being suspended indefinitely from the organization, on top of receiving a 6-game suspension from the NHL. And a part of this was just because he didn't fit in with the team and he just wanted to go back to New York. Because after this incident, Avery would be sent down and placed on waivers. Except he wasn't going anywhere besides the Rangers. And somehow, Avery, who got slammed on his initial contract, would get his payday and somehow force his way back to the Rangers. But this time with a nice little ticket. And honestly guys, this one was just absurd, and if you guys can think of any other weird examples of a player leaving just to crawl back, let me know, comment down below. Mike Fisher. Drafted in the second round in the 1998 NHL draft, Fisher would become a cult star in the Ottawa Senators organization, and it was easy to understand why. The dude was a goddamn warrior. Leadership, grit, heart and soul, a player that will supplement and elevate almost any roster. But after spending 11 seasons in Ottawa, Mike Fisher would be shockingly traded to the Nashville Predators. Now, I know you can't tell, but that shockingly was in quotations. And to be clear, there was no formal request from Mike Fisher to be traded. But here's the backstory. In 2008, Mike Fisher and Carrie Underwood would begin dating. And if you don't know Carrie Underwood, she is one of the biggest country music stars in the world, who just so happened to live in Smashville. 2 years later, in the 2010 offseason, they would get married. And not even 6 months after, Mike Fisher would be shockingly traded to where else but the Nashville Predators, the same place that his new wife, Carrie Underwood, just so happened to live. Now, don't get me wrong, I am not throwing shade on either of them, as this trade not only made sense from an organizational standpoint, but it also made sense from a strategic standpoint to grow the game. I mean, one of the most popular singers in the world marrying a hockey player, that is only going to be good for the growth of the game. And I don't think we'll ever truly know what happened behind the scenes, but come on, I think we just had to put 2 and 2 together here. Matt Duchene. Drafted 3rd overall in 2009, Duchene would become a building block piece for the Colorado Avalanche. But there was an issue. In Duchene's 10 years with the Avs, he played 8 playoff games. And after the Avs would finish with one of the worst season records in NHL history, Duchene wanted nothing to do with the team. Thus, he would demand a trade, quoting, "I just want playoff hockey." A little foreshadowing, ladies and gentlemen. And he would get his wish, as Joe Sakic would unload Duchene and absolutely fleece the Sens. As not only did Colorado receive a pick that turned into Bowen Byram, the 4th overall pick, not only did they receive other pivotal roster players, but they would make the playoffs in that same season. Even though he got his trade, the Ottawa Senators would finish second last in the NHL. He'd be shipped off several more times, end up in Nashville, sign a 8-year $64 million ticket, where Duchene has been brutally underperforming, as this season he would put up a career low 13 points. And what is ironic about this entire situation? Colorado today is an absolute wagon, ranked as the top team in the league by most people, led by a nasty young core with no signs of slowing down. Whereas Duchene is now an overpaid forward on a disappointing Nashville squad. Oh, the irony.